sound and all that good stuff?
You sound fantastic.
Fabulous.
You look fantastic. Chris
Well,
Barker,
you
ladies
look
and gentlemen.
marvelous. Oh, sorry. I'll stop talking.
No, you can do whatever you want. This is America. I love the airplane. Look at you got your airplane toy in the back.
That's me, buddy. All things transportation right here.
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, all things insurance with samurai swords, a Spartan helmet, and a Peloton.
That's right. We should go into business together. I think we can figure something out.
The BS Podcast is where I swear to God, it's absolutely going to be a big thing. So right next to Joe Rogan, 10 million people a week listening to the BS Podcast.
Yes.
God bless him. Anyway, all right. So very quickly, we decided, and I speak off the cuff, this bridge collision with the ship crosses our worlds in a perfect Venn diagram. You being an absolute expert in the transportation space, and then me in the insurance space, especially with my work with Lloyd's and really crazy kind of risks. So I think the inspiration of this was, all right, how would insurance and the National Transportation Safety Administration and the government, all that, how's that all going to meld to, like you were just saying earlier, with this crane trying to take bits of this broken bridge off this boat that's got a bunch of containers filled with product? And how far back are we going to go? Is it dirty fuel? Is it electrical failure on the ship? And did an inspector write off something they shouldn't have write off or signed off on, right? A lot of fun parts. So where do you think the feds are going to do, especially for the NTSA?
So the first part is obviously the tragic situation that happened earlier this week. I mean, the loss of life is I think first and foremost on top of everybody's minds when something like this happens. It's something where you have a ship that, as we understand so far in its early days in the investigation, loses power, hits the bridge. The bridge has a catastrophic collapse, and we lose multiple people's lives. And so you've got the human loss of life factor. You have the massive impact on the transportation system for the East Coast, because Baltimore is a big port with a tremendous amount of volume of shipping traffic and commerce coming in and out of there. And then you now have this massive disruption to the local community, but the U.S. economy and the world shipping situation. So you kind of have to look at this in multiple layers. The first, of course, is the loss of human life and how, handling that with the families. And then the second part is the president and the Secretary of Transportation and the NTSB, which is leading the investigation, is figuring out what happened, why did it happen, and how do we repair. Obviously, we've got this massive bridge that's blocking a major port, so they're going to have to take that apart, and that effort has started today, or actually earlier this week, but you see today with big cranes arriving in the port of Baltimore to start pulling the bridge pieces out. They got to remove the bridge that's sitting on the bow of the ship first and foremost, because it's kind of literally stuck in the harbor. From early reports, the weight of the ship the bridge when it crashed down on the bow of the ship, it literally just drove the nose of the ship into the bottom of the bay. So they're trying to cut the ship free, or the bridge free from the ship first, get that moved out of the way, and then you begin the really long process of getting all the parts of the bridge that are on the bottom of the bay clear. And then you have a whole separate team that's got to assess, okay, how are we going to think about the rebuild process? And there's a normal time for construction, and then there's this circumstance. So this is everybody getting involved to try to figure out how do we get this commerce channel reopened, both the physical bridge for surface transportation, but certainly the waterway for all the shipping activity. And the financial impact is tremendous. So you're absolutely right. It's an interesting mix where transportation meets insurance, because when this happens, there's the investigation, the remediation, the who's at fault, how do we fix this, and then how do we get things restored back to where they were previously.
I know from the insurance, the loss of life is tragic. The people that saw warning, both on the ship itself and the bridge workers, they saved hundreds of lives. From what I understand, guys ran out onto the highway and stopped cars.
Yes.
Yes. So those people are heroes. It looks like it's 6 people that have lost their lives. I know from the insurance world, and there's no amount of money that replaces a human being. But these are probably all dads, coaches, family members. There's no amount of money. They will be taken care of very quickly. And from a cynical point of view, it could be from the PR perspective. No one is going to mess around with numbers for those 6 bridge workers. Mm-hmm. Hi, family. Here's your check. We are so sorry this happened. Where I think where we're going to get into the weeds is the blame game at the back end. So I think you're right from the get the ship out of the way, get the bridge debris out of the way, and start the rebuild. Mm-hmm. That's going to be accelerated massively through the feds, the state of Maryland, whatever the authority for the port is. They're all going to want to get that going because of the commerce aspect. I think the lawsuits are going to ride for years to find out why did the engines fail. So there's a term, subrogation.
Sure.
It's going to get subrogated. And for those playing at home, it looks like this Lloyd's syndicate's going to write a check between $2 and $4 billion. The feds are going to dump in some money. And then once the coast 30,000 cars a day was the
something 35,000 range roughly. Yes.
Once that gets going, that's when the lawyers are like, okay, here we go. Because I guarantee you, Lloyd's is going to figure out a way to get back some of that $2 to $4 billion. Right? They're going to go after the product liability. They're going to go after, is it a systems failure? Is it a maintenance failure? Did someone sign off on something they shouldn't have signed off on? That's a distinct possibility. Maybe that ship never should have left port. But the guys and gals that were injured or, unfortunately lost their lives, I think those checks will go out very quickly and without question.
Yeah. And from early reporting, the ship had some apparent electrical issue at port. The early reports showing that it was having electrical problems. The question that will come up through the investigation is, how did that get resolved? Did it get resolved to the level it needed to? Everybody's playing hindsight right now after the fact, but clearly there was something involved because it had a complete power loss, which according to the ship captain said that impacted the ability to, safely navigate the ship.
Here. So
the NTSB and other regulatory bodies are going to go through that in great detail. And then
what is the procedure for a ship to get, I know you do a lot in aviation and you did a lot with autonomous vehicles. What does that checklist look like before I get to fly the plane, move the boat, allow the autonomous bus to go pick up grandma? How deep does that go?
It's a great question. So similar to aviation, you hear the term black box talked about a lot in aircraft. The black box is the data recorder that records all the activities of an airplane pre-flight, during flight. Well, there's a similar scenario of a black box in shipping.
Cool.
And the NTSB has recovered the black box from the ship, and they'll be going through all of the data on that ship to understand if there was power issues, propulsion system issues. Did it lose? It apparently lost power for a period of time, which is why the captain radioed in the Mayday signal. And as reported yesterday, tried to drop the anchors to slow down. But the problem is you need a lot of distance to be, you've got to
stop on a dime.
What's that?
They don't stop on a dime. You
can't no, they do not. And in an ideal, if you have power, you reverse thrust, much like in an airplane landing, you reverse thrust upon landing and it slows the speed down. But if you don't have power, so it's an interesting question you bring up, because in airplanes, you have an auxiliary power unit that serves as a mechanism for running a lot of the aircraft and like the plane.
Like a separate, for like a separate battery, if you will.
It's a whole separate motor power
wow.
system at the back end of the airplane. And so when you remember the airplane that landed on the Hudson, when the engines failed, they switched on the APU. It's called the auxiliary power unit, and that allowed the pilots to be able to still control some aspects of the airplane. So the question becomes, what type of APU-like systems might be possible or perhaps further bolstered in a situation like this?
Did their APU fail for this ship?
Don't know. Have no idea.
We have no idea.
That's a question of is there something like that could be put into play now or more so into the future that would allow the ships to be able to still maintain critical functionality and avoid something like this perhaps in the future? It's a question, something to look into.
From an insurance perspective, which is really interesting. I know this sounds really irrelevant, but I wouldn't be surprised if the policy form is identical. And policy forms are basically a parametric statement: if X, then Y. So if X happens, Y check is issued. So there's in small business, especially in large supermarkets or people with a lot of fresh food, if you have an auxiliary power unit, you have a generator in the back of your supermarket to keep the refrigerator and the freezer going in case there's a power outage. Most big supermarkets have one for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And the irony of that is they have what they call spoilage coverage that's more enhanced, because if everything goes down and all that produce gets lost, they get a check to replace the produce.
Right.
If you don't have that system, believe it or not, your spoilage is limited. That's really interesting, because if this guy lost power, and I can't believe that for a major ship wouldn't have an APU, an auxiliary power unit, for just such an emergency as an airplane does. That would shock me if that didn't exist. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. That'd be fun to find out.
Yeah.
That's two system failures.
Well, and that's what it's about. Any major transportation systems that we look at is you build in redundancies.
Right.
So if you're, it's just the same scenario applies if you have a 2-engine jet or a 4-engine jet, and you design it so that if one of the engines fails, you can still fly on another. And if you have total engine failure, you have an APU that at least gives you an ability to make critical systems controls to try to do some type of emergency landing. And so in my old days working for companies like Boeing and Honeywell, we always talked about you have to build in multiple layers of redundancy so that if one fails, you've got a backup. If the backup fails, you've got another option. So that you're not in a situation where you're completely without any options whatsoever. So it will potentially open up some scenarios where what are the backup options? Or maybe there's going to be tugboats that carry ships out past critical assets in the future.
Right.
Past the bridge.
You'll change down the road.
Yeah.
But now,
yeah,
I have a feeling if from the insurance perspective, the Lloyd's market will definitely, Britannia will, and they're called clubs, by the way, kids, which is really funny that they call themselves clubs. And it's not the club that you want to go play tennis at, but they will write the check. They will not balk, because the policies at this level of insurance are what they call all perils.
Mm-hmm.
Means there's no finagling. There's no, did the brush fire really start over here, like your house, or is there? They're not going to mince words about the cause of the accident or anything like that. Who's to blame? They're going to write the check, but they will on the back end try to subrogate to get some of that money back. So the claim process for an all perils policy is very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
How much money do you need? Oh, you need $2 billion. Okay. Who do I make that out to? $2 billion, State of Maryland, Port Authority, Bob. Boom. Mm-hmm. They'll literally write that check like that.
Yeah.
However, when the investigations start, there will be lawyers at that table that represent Britannia. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what I saw yesterday was that in the discussions about remediation for this is that the insurance responsibility will be spread across an entire network of organizations.
Yeah. So Lloyd's is not.
It's not going to just be one entity that's going to be on the hook for the cost of this. It's going to be spread across, as you know, the main insurers, the reinsurer market globally. And so it's designed to do just that type of thing.
Lloyd's is not an insurance company.
Right.
Lloyd's is a place. It's the best way to describe Lloyd's is a place.
Mm-hmm.
To understand what Lloyd's was very quickly, it used to be a coffee shop, and what underwriting meant was simply this: a ship captain comes in with a manifest and sits down with a very, very rich person, and the owner of the cargo or the person going to go get cargo and bring it back, the ship and the ship owner sit down with this very rich person, and the rich person says, you know what, you give me this amount of money and I will underwrite this manifest and I'll protect all parties from perils. So underwriting is that the rich guy signs the bottom. Flash forward a couple hundred years, and Lloyd's is a place where these clubs, also known as syndicates, you got to love the English language that they call them syndicates or clubs.
Right.
Not one syndicate or club is on a peril, on a ship or anything like that. It's multiple groups. So 20% of the risk will be on one big guy. That'll be what they call the main underwriter. But then that last 80% could be spread out over 10, 15, 20 different other syndicates or clubs to write checks. In Lloyd's, back in the day, there's this huge bell. And if a ship sunk, then someone would go and ring the bell to alert the entire building that pull out your checkbooks, kids. Meet me in the lobby because you're about to write a check. Literally, that is what was done. The system may have not, they don't use a bell anymore, but the system really changed. So Britannia might be the main insurer. You might be the 20% of the risk. So let's go the high end, $4 billion. 20% of $4 billion is $800 million. Okay. 800 million. I'll send that. Okay. But all the other syndicates behind it, they're in for 25 million, 100 million, 80 million, 72 million, all this stuff. And each one of these amounts were negotiated previously when the policy was written. And they're all going to write a check. So all that money is going to go out like that.
Right.
Not just one guy. Then you talked about this reinsurance thing, which is another crazy animal. Insurance syndicates or clubs insure themselves with reinsurance, which is insurance for insurance. I know that's like, what? But it goes exactly to what you just said about redundancy. All right, I've got my reserves for the day-to-day losses. I've got reinsurance for the big cat stuff. And if those two things go down, typically a government has to step in.
Right.
Right.
Which, as we've seen, the U.S. government in this circumstance is directly stepping in.
Right. And the cynical answer to that is because it's an election year and Maryland is a swing state. Or in a better, nicer world, yeah, we got to get the bridge up because of commerce. And these are people's jobs. Like that poor Domino's sugar plant that's just like right there on I think, one side of the bridge.
Sure.
I can't even imagine what those trucks have to do to get around when they could have gone like that.
Right.
Just to deliver my sugar for my coffee. But yeah, so that it's kind of interesting, the redundancy aspect that you said, but the sign-off procedures, how many humans have to touch, okay, when an airplane taking off or that ship, how many humans have to touch that procedure before, boom, boat can leave?
Well, in multiple facets of transportation, if you have some type of mechanical issue, mechanical failure, power failure, engine failure.
We've all been on a delayed flight.
Right. This is a heavily regulated industry, and safety is the number one priority. So the first thing is that you call in the maintenance teams to basically check these systems to make sure they're operating as they're supposed to. And there's a safety sign off. So if you're on an airplane and there's an engine light before the plane backs out, the airline is calling the maintenance department to come and check, and they have to verify that whatever that issue is has been deemed airworthy and safe.
Right.
Similar thing would apply in maritime, where if there was something that potentially was going to cause a catastrophic failure of the ship's propulsion system, some entity is going to have to check that to verify is it performing as it's supposed to before it's allowed to disembark and head off to sea. What we don't know, and of course, again, this is an active investigation, and the NTSB is going to go through this in great detail, is what was the chain of command from the port that if this ship was truly having electrical issues, did it go through the proper chain of command to make sure that it was cleared for disembarking? And we don't know the answer to that because it's obviously early days in the investigation.
Woe to the kitten who cut the corner.
Yeah, and it's going to be thorough. But the other thing I think is really interesting in this is that this incident happens on the heels of what we saw not long ago in the Suez Canal.
Yeah, to explain that situation, what happened there?
So in that situation, a ship essentially literally got sideways in the Suez Canal, hitting a sandbar, essentially misguiding the channel. So the canal has a deep channel, and the ship got into the sandbar, and it literally swung diagonally across, blocking all throughput on the canal. And the Suez Canal is right up there with the Panama Canal in terms of its importance for global shipping. And as we saw, the entire shipping world had to be recalibrated for commerce because it was blocked for, I can't remember the exact number of days, but it was significant. Then the ship finally is dislodged from the sandbar, taken back up toward Cairo in the Mediterranean Sea. And then to your point, there was a whole process of, well, who's paying the cost for this global disruption?
Well, this is the difference between the Baltimore, Maryland bridge and boat hit sandbar. When the boat hit the sandbar, it was called the Ever Again or the whatever.
I think it was Evergreen. Evergreen, yeah.
So insurance needs two things. It needs bodily injury or property damage. Okay? Those are that's how you calculate a loss.
Sure.
Well, unfortunately, we have bodily injury and loss of life with what happened in Maryland. Okay? And we clearly have property damage.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Boat's probably, the ship's probably damaged. The bridge is completely kaput. And there's probably some ancillary stuff that happened as well. But with Evergreen, no one got hurt and nothing broke. So
technically they had to come in and dredge out
but that's
the
fine.
embankment. But as far as structural, like a bridge falling into the Suez Canal, no.
Nothing broke in a week. I know that sounds ridiculous, but to the insurance brain, well, nothing broke. So that total claim, 6 days, was $100 million. The government of Egypt gets $15 million a day from, I guess, charging a toll through the Suez Canal. That's cool. So 15 million times 6 is 90 million. The dredging and get the ship out of the way was another 10, and Lloyd's was out.
But what about all the ships that were trying to traverse through the canal?
That's not insurable.
Yeah.
It's not insurable because accidents happen. All right. So Ricky Gervais does a great thing about the act of God joke. When you insurance guy calls about the volcano in Iceland, was that you? Oh yeah, that was all me. Right. It's okay. It was God, act of God. So no claim. That stuff that you can't insure against that loss of income or anything like that. This one in Maryland, the only loss of income is the stuff on the ship. Right? Because it was the responsibility of that shipping company to get the stuff in the containers to the places it needed to go. I don't think there's any fresh produce on this boat, but
There were
cars.
Early reporting. There was 6 to 8 containers that were knocked overboard from the bow of the ship.
Okay, so
there was some hazardous material that was being transported. It was like 4 to 6 containers. That was toward the back and aft part of the ship. Those didn't go over, as we understand. So the containers that went into the bay, obviously there's going to be some level of remediation associated with that.
Right.
But the big thing too, Kevin, that the Transportation Secretary brought up was, when that Francis Scott Key Bridge was built back in the 1970s, we didn't have container ships that are the size of high-rise buildings traversing these waterways.
Right.
And now we do. And so the question that's going to come up is, what are the new operating procedures for these ships, so that insurance companies like a Lloyd's or others have some kind of confidence and peace of mind that one ship can't take out like an entire port or canal or some major mode of global commerce.
Well, remember, Lloyd's being in London and all the reinsurers being in Europe.
Sure.
They have I'm sure they got lobbyists running around DC, but they really have no regulatory power, right? I mean, imagine Britannia or any of the other syndicates in Lloyd's telling the world's governments, hey, this is how we want shipping done. They'd be like, yeah, okay, we'll get to that next week, bud. We got other stuff we got to do. Now, a local insurance, a domestic carrier could definitely have a lot more influence on a local government from like a state level, right? Sure. Here in California, we don't need to talk about what's going on in property insurance in California. But they actually have a little bit more power. Lloyd's doesn't have a power to really say we need to go left, right, or center. I think what's going to happen is the regulations will change from a local perspective in terms of who's going to build this bridge. And I'll tell you what's going on. So they're going to say, okay, we've got these big ships. We've got to redesign this bridge such that these big ships can get through a little bit better, so on and so forth. That policy that's going to be put on the product, if you will, of the new bridge, that's where those regulations are going to come into play. Because if they don't follow those new regs and it's discovered down the road that Bob the Builder cut some corners, all right, someone's in trouble.
Or you could see a situation, it's quite possible, where they say tugboat assist is required.
That could be really interesting.
Past the point of the bridge, or
right.
on all harbors, to say, because maybe a lesson learned from this, and this is purely speculation, but if you think about critical assets, most ports have major bridges traversing the waterways.
Right.
Maybe there's a scenario where they say tugs are going to have to get the ships past those bridges to some extent.
I can't even imagine what would happen at the Golden Gate or the Bay Area Bridge went down.
Exactly. I'm just going to say, I mean, you imagine if that ship hit the Golden Gate. I mean, there is, as Secretary Buttigieg said, there is no ship designed to withstand a 500 plus ton cargo ship running into the side of it.
Yeah, no bridge is never. There's no modeling for that.
There's no engineering design that is designed.
Gigantic airbags, Chris.
It's a floating high-rise building going into the side of a fixed structure. I mean, it's just
physics.
It's not gonna. Law of averages is going to tell you someone's going to lose, and it's probably going to be the bridge. So,
right.
And I guess the other thing too. I mean, thank God that this didn't happen at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the middle of a commute hour. I mean, because we wouldn't be talking about 6 lost lives. We'd be talking about. I mean, any loss of human life is horrible, but
thousands. If
this had been a different time of the day,
would that change regs too? Because it was 1:30 in the morning, so we humans don't like to be up at that hour. But is that common? It's another question we should probably research. Is it common for these big ships to be moving at that hour because it's a lower traffic burden on the bridges that they are going underneath? That's an interesting.
I mean, the reality is that those ships are coming all hours of the day and night.
Okay, so that doesn't really make
based on port activity. I think what there will be is there will be probably a step back and look at if this was to happen again. I mean, as Secretary Buttigieg said, this could happen in any location.
Oh, dude.
It could be San Francisco, it could be Seattle, it could be New York, Baltimore. What is the ability for the region to withstand this type of situation? So if one of the major bridges went out in New York, cutting off Manhattan to other boroughs or San Francisco, a staggering level of impact.
Right.
So that's where the regulatory bodies are going to probably huddle together and say, all right, how do we bring that likelihood of that situation down?
Right.
Which does obviously have direct insurance ramifications. And how do we feel comfortable that the systems on the ship and around the environment are as redundant as humanly possible?
Right. This is cool.
Yeah,
I really appreciate this. NTSB, not the NTSA. Sorry about that.
National Transportation Safety Board.
Yeah, board. Right.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fun to play out. I'm going to reach out a little bit more into Lloyd's and see where this. I've got a couple toes in the door at Lloyd's, and you'll be doing a tour with one of my rugby buddies very soon. You'll be able to see the sword that Napoleon surrendered to Lord Nelson at the Battle of Cairo.
I look forward to it. I can't wait.
And the note that the Royal Navy sent to Mrs. Nelson when Lord Nelson went down at Trafalgar.
Wow.
Dear Mrs. Nelson, we regret to inform you. And here's your life insurance check. I'm dead serious.
I want to see the RMS Titanic claim that I understand is filed there. I mean, just to step back and think about that historically is probably going to be quite surreal. So.
Yeah. So what happens at Lloyd's? There's this huge book, and back in the day, I mean, we're talking a massive book, at least 3 foot by 5 foot. And when a boat went down, they would log the claim. USS Lusitania, whatever it is, right? The Britannia, HMS.
Right.
And if there was life insurance on the crew or the captain, that guy's name's on there and the amount.
Wow.
Cargo amount, check to who. Boat owner, check to them. And it just remember these are all perils policies, so there's no mitigating. These write the checks. And you go back, the logbook is still there. There's two of them. There's the logbook for 2024. And what they do is every day when they turn the page, now you could go back to 1924. And if you ask, you can get 1824, 1724. You can see on that day, 100, 200, 300 years ago, what claims came in.
So a question for you, having just watched a documentary of the commerce happening or trying to happen during the World War II era, and so many ships being sunk across the Atlantic, are all those logged and tracked as far as the system that you're describing? I mean, so if we were in a military conflict and they're being sunk by foreign adversaries,
all perils, that includes war.
Yeah.
All perils.
Okay.
Like space aliens.
Yeah.
Field engines, torpedoes, all perils.
All perils. Interesting. Well, and there was also that ship not too long ago that sunk just outside of Spain with all the cars that went to the bottom of the ocean. So, yeah. Tragic stuff.
Insurance is an interesting world. All right, Chris, this is killer.
Thank Absolutely. You so much. Yep. Thanks for having me.
Let's do this again. We know what we should do. In 2 weeks, we'll follow up, see how things play out.
All right. Oh, this will be going on for many weeks for sure.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right,
Thanks, all.
Good talking to you.
All right, cool. I'll kill it there when I do the editing. Okay. Yeah, it's cool. I'll share with you the full recording. And then my assistant Carla does video editing.
Okay.
So she'll be able to pull out little 1 minute, 2 minute clips and sound bites.
All right. Very good.
Market the shit out of it. If you
Sorry
want.
if there's a little skylight light thing going on here.
I've got a sun right above my head.
Yeah. It's feel free to edit that. I have a light I use for doing this kind of stuff. This face, but if it's a sunny day, which we're having today, sometimes it gets a little crazy.
There's sun in Arizona.
Sun in Arizona. Although we got rain. Your rain's coming. Our rain. We're supposed to rain on Easter Sunday apparently. So
good for the environment.
That's
all
right,
dude.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Dude, this is awesome. See ya.
All right. I'll see you. Bye-bye.